I'm Jessica, 28, standing frozen at my brother's wedding reception as his words echo through the ballroom. And let's not forget my sister, the family embarrassment. Andrew laughs into the microphone. 200 guests turn to stare at me. My medical school achievements mean nothing to them now. For years I struggled through classes while my family focused solely on Andrew's finance career. My cheeks burn as champagne glasses clink awkwardly around me. I consider bolting for the exit when the best man suddenly approaches the microphone. What happens next will change everything. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe to join me on this emotional journey of family betrayal and unexpected redemption. Growing up with Andrew, who's 4 years older, meant living in a constant shadow. From the beginning, our parents made it clear who the star of the family was. Our childhood home in suburban Connecticut featured a hallway lined with Andrew's trophies, certificates, and academic awards. My report cards, even when they improved, were met with casual acknowledgement at best. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. Andrew excelled naturally in everything: academics, sports, social situations. His charisma made him popular, while I struggled with undiagnosed dyslexia until 3rd grade. By the time I received proper support and began improving academically, the family narrative was already set. Andrew was the successful one, and I was the one who needed help. "Jessica tries hard," my mother would tell relatives, with that specific tone that implied trying wasn't the same as succeeding. Meanwhile, Andrew's every achievement was celebrated with dinners out and proud phone calls to extended family. Despite this, I found my passion in science during high school. My biology teacher, Mrs. Peterson, was the first person who recognized my analytical abilities and encouraged me to pursue medicine. "You have a unique way of connecting ideas," she told me after I completed an extra credit project on neuroplasticity. "That's something special." When I was accepted to medical school, my parents attended the ceremony but left early to attend Andrew's corporate award dinner the same evening. "Your brother's event has a strict schedule," my father explained. "I'm sure you understand." And I did understand. I understood exactly where I ranked in the family priorities. Medical school was brutal. While Andrew received financial support from our parents for his MBA, I worked part-time jobs between grueling study sessions to cover expenses they wouldn't. There were nights I fell asleep at the library, exhausted from trying to balance work and studies. Andrew would occasionally call, but our conversations inevitably turned to his accomplishments and connections in the financial world. "Network more," he'd advise condescendingly. "It's not just about studying, Jess. It's who you know." He never asked about my research or clinical rotations. During my 2nd year, when I developed pneumonia from exhaustion and stress, I spent 3 days in the hospital alone. My roommate eventually contacted my parents, who sent flowers but explained they couldn't visit because they were helping Andrew move into his new luxury apartment. Despite everything, I graduated in the top 10% of my class and secured a competitive residency position. At the graduation ceremony, my parents attended but spent most of the time showing other families pictures of Andrew's recent promotion to senior investment analyst. "Jessica's always been the stubborn one," my mother told a classmate's parents. "We never thought she'd make it through, but here we are." The backhanded compliment stung more than outright criticism would have. Over the next few years, I specialized in neurological research, eventually publishing a paper on novel treatment approaches for traumatic brain injuries. The research garnered attention in medical circles, but when I shared the journal publication with my family, my father merely glanced at it and said, "Well, that's nice. Did you see Andrew was featured in Financial Quarterly?" When Andrew got engaged to Samantha, a marketing executive from a wealthy family, my parents were ecstatic. "Finally, a real power couple in the family," my mother gushed during our monthly phone call. The implied comparison wasn't subtle. The wedding invitation arrived with a note from Andrew asking me to keep things simple during the wedding weekend. "Samantha's family is very traditional," he wrote. "Maybe don't mention your weird research stuff too much." I almost declined attending. My colleague Diane urged me to skip it. They don't deserve you, she insisted over lunch in the hospital cafeteria. But some stubborn part of me wanted to show up, to prove I wasn't affected by their dismissal, to demonstrate I had become someone worthy of respect despite their lack of support. The night before the wedding, at the rehearsal dinner, Andrew introduced me to Samantha's parents with a telling description. "This is my sister Jessica. She's a doctor, but not the kind that makes any money." He laughed, and they laughed with him, while I stood there with a frozen smile. The morning of Andrew's wedding, I woke up alone in my hotel room with a knot in my stomach. The digital clock read 7:15 a.m., still 5 hours before the ceremony, but I knew I needed every minute to prepare myself mentally and physically for the day ahead. I laid out my carefully chosen navy blue dress on the bed. After Andrew's specific request last week, I had exchanged my original, slightly more eye-catching dress for this understated option. "Try not to stand out too much, Jess," Andrew had said during a phone call. "Samantha's extended family is very traditional, and this day is about us, not your uniqueness." The way he hesitated before the word uniqueness made it clear it wasn't a compliment. In the shower, memories of childhood events flooded back, family photos where I was positioned half-hidden behind Andrew, school achievements that went unacknowledged while Andrew's minor accomplishments were celebrated lavishly. I shook my head, sending water droplets against the glass door. "Not today," I told myself firmly. "Today I'm just going to get through this with dignity." I spent an hour on my makeup, ensuring it was flawless but subtle. My hair was styled in a simple updo that wouldn't draw attention. Every element of my appearance was calibrated to be presentable but forgettable, exactly what Andrew had requested. The hotel room phone rang as I was putting on my earrings. It was my mother. "Jessica, where are you?" "The family photos start in 20 minutes at the venue." I checked my watch in confusion. "Mom, the schedule says family photos are at 10:30. It's only 9:45. "Oh, we decided to move them earlier. Andrew wanted some special photos with just him, your father and me first. You'll be in the extended family shots afterward." The familiar sting of exclusion burned in my chest. "I see. I'll be there as soon as I can." I arrived at the Vineyard venue slightly breathless from rushing, only to discover that the earlier family photos were, in fact, happening exactly at the originally scheduled time. I'd been deliberately given the wrong information so they could take the real family photos without me. As I approached the photography area, I overheard my mother talking to Samantha's aunt. "Andrew has always been our pride and joy," she was saying. "Graduating top of his class at Wharton, making vice president by 30, he's truly exceptional. Samantha is so lucky to have found him." I cleared my throat as I approached. "Hi Mom, I'm here for the photos." My mother turned, her smile dimming slightly. "Oh Jessica, there you are. That dress is a bit wrinkled, isn't it? And couldn't you have done something more elegant with your hair for your brother's special day?" I swallowed the retort that rose instinctively. Today wasn't the day for confrontation. The photographer directed me to stand at the far edge of group photos, practically making me lean in to stay in frame. In one setup, I was positioned behind a tall cousin, barely visible. After photos, guests began arriving for the ceremony. I was helping an elderly great-aunt find her seat when Samantha approached in her pre-ceremony robe. "Jessica. I'm so glad you're here," she said, embracing me warmly. Unlike the rest of Andrew's chosen circle, Samantha had always been genuinely kind to me. "I wanted to thank you for rearranging your conference schedule to be here. Andrew mentioned you had to cancel a presentation?" I was surprised Andrew had noticed or mentioned that detail. "It wasn't a big deal," I lied. "The presentation had actually been significant, a chance to share my research with leading neurologists." "Well, I appreciate it," Samantha said sincerely. "Family is everything to me, and it means a lot having you here." As we chatted, I noticed Andrew approaching with a tense expression. "Sam, your mother's looking for you." "Something about the veil." Samantha squeezed my arm. "We'll catch up properly at the reception." As she walked away, Andrew lingered. "Remember what we talked about, Jess. low profile. I nodded stiffly. I know how to behave at a wedding, Andrew. As guests continued to arrive, I noticed a man in a perfectly tailored suit watching our interaction from across the garden. He was tall with dark hair, observing with unusual intensity. When he caught me looking back, he didn't glance away but instead held my gaze for a moment before nodding slightly. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place him. "Who's that?" I asked a nearby cousin. "That's the best man. Some hotshot friend of Andrew's from the business world. They've been thick as thieves all weekend." As the ceremony began and I took my seat, not with family but in the fourth row with distant relatives, I caught the best man looking in my direction again. This time, there was something like curiosity in his expression. I pushed thoughts of the mysterious best man aside as Andrew and Samantha exchanged vows. Despite everything, seeing my brother standing there, momentarily vulnerable as he promised his life to someone, stirred complicated emotions. Part of me still remembered the brother who had once taught me to ride a bike, before achievements and parental favoritism had created the chasm between us. As the ceremony concluded and the newlyweds walked back down the aisle, I noticed the best man watching me again. This time, his expression held something I couldn't quite identify, something that looked almost like recognition, though I was certain we'd never met. The reception began with a cocktail hour in the vineyard's elegant stone courtyard. I found my assigned seat at a table far from the wedding party, surrounded by elderly relatives and Samantha's distant cousins who regarded me with polite disinterest. The seating arrangement couldn't have made my status in the family clearer if they'd placed me in another building entirely. "So you're Andrew's sister?" one of Samantha's relatives asked. "He's such an impressive young man. Your parents must be so proud." "They certainly are," I agreed, not bothering to mention myself in that equation. Dinner passed uneventfully as I made small talk with tablemates who clearly wondered why the sister of the groom was seated with them instead of at the family table. I kept my eyes on my plate, avoiding looking at the head table where my parents sat beaming next to Andrew and Samantha. After the main course, the DJ announced it was time for toasts. My father spoke first, his voice thick with emotion as he praised Andrew's accomplishments and welcomed Samantha to the family. My mother followed with anecdotes about Andrew's childhood brilliance. Neither mentioned me. Then Andrew himself stood, champagne glass in hand, thanking everyone for coming. He acknowledged his parents, Samantha's family, his college friends, colleagues, even his first-grade teacher who had apparently made the trip for his special day. Just as I thought he would conclude without acknowledging my existence, Andrew turned in my direction. "And I should probably mention my sister Jessica, who's somewhere back there." A spotlight suddenly found me, illuminating my table like an interrogation. 200 faces turned to stare. "Jessica's always been different," Andrew continued with a smirk that only I would recognize as malicious. "When we were kids, Mom and Dad worried she might never find her way. While I was bringing home trophies, she was bringing home, well, disappointment mostly." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. My face burned as I maintained a wooden smile. "She did eventually become a doctor," Andrew continued. "Though not the kind that actually helps patients or makes any money." More laughter, louder this time. "She's in a lab somewhere doing experiments that nobody understands. But hey, at least the family embarrassment cleaned up nice for one day, right?" The spotlight remained fixed on me as glasses around the room clinked in awkward toast. My chest tightened as if bands were constricting around my lungs. The elderly aunt beside me patted my hand sympathetically while pointedly avoiding eye contact. In that moment, I was transported back to my medical school graduation. After receiving my diploma, I'd spotted my family in the audience. They'd arrived late and left immediately after my name was called, missing the announcement that I'd received a prestigious research award. At the brief dinner afterward, Andrew had dominated the conversation with news of his own promotion, while my parents asked no questions about my accomplishments or plans. Back in the present, the spotlight finally moved away as Andrew continued his speech. My hands trembled beneath the tablecloth as I contemplated walking out. I could make a quiet exit, drive back to the hotel, check out early, and be halfway home before anyone noticed my absence. But something held me in place, perhaps the same stubborn determination that had carried me through medical school without family support. I would not give Andrew the satisfaction of seeing me retreat. I excused myself to the restroom, walking with measured steps despite my desire to run. Inside a luxurious private stall, I pressed my forehead against the cool marble wall and focused on breathing. My phone buzzed with a text from my colleague Diane. "How's it going? Surviving the wedding from hell?" I couldn't bring myself to respond. A gentle knock on the stall door startled me. "Jessica? Are you okay?" It was Samantha's voice, concerned and genuine. I quickly wiped my eyes and opened the door. "I'm fine. Just needed a moment." Samantha stood there in her wedding gown, looking uncomfortable. I heard what Andrew said. "I wanted you to know I don't think it was funny. At all." "It's fine," I said automatically. "That's just how Andrew jokes." "No," Samantha said firmly. "It's not fine. And that's not joking, it's cruelty." She paused, looking conflicted. "There's a lot you don't know about what's been happening. But this is my wedding day, and I can't." She trailed off. "You don't need to worry about me," I assured her, summoning a smile. "This is your day. Go enjoy it." Samantha hesitated. "Andrew isn't always the person he pretends to be, Jessica. Remember that." With those cryptic words, she squeezed my hand and left. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, straightened my shoulders, and prepared to return to the reception with whatever dignity I could muster. When I returned to the reception, the dance floor had opened and guests were mingling freely. I decided to give it 30 more minutes before making a discreet exit. No one would miss me, and I could avoid any further humiliation. I was standing near the bar, nursing a glass of water, when I felt someone approach. Turning, I found myself face to face with the best man I'd noticed earlier. Up close, he was even more striking, tall with intelligent eyes and an air of quiet confidence. "Dr. Jessica Taylor," he said, extending his hand. "I've been hoping to meet you properly. I'm Michael Hayes." The name hit me like a physical force. Dr. Michael Hayes was a leading neurosurgeon and researcher, head of the prestigious Neurological Innovation Center that I'd recently applied to join. His groundbreaking work on neural regeneration had revolutionized the field. "Dr. Hayes," I managed, shaking his hand. "I didn't expect to meet you here." A slight smile crossed his face. "I imagine not. And please, call me Michael." "How do you know my brother?" I asked, still struggling to reconcile this medical luminary with Andrew's finance world. "We met at a hospital fundraiser. His firm manages investments for some medical research foundations." Michael's eyes studied me with interest. "But I knew your name long before I met Andrew. Your paper on neuroplasticity in traumatic recovery was remarkable. Your approach to neural pathway regeneration is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need." For a moment, I thought I might have misheard him. No one in my family circle had ever acknowledged my research, let alone praised it. "You've read my paper?" I asked incredulously. "Read it? I've referenced it in my own work." That's why I recognized your name immediately when Andrew mentioned his sister was a neurological researcher. Michael leaned slightly closer. "Though I must say, the way he described your work didn't match the brilliance I saw in your publication." I felt a flush of pride mixed with lingering humiliation from Andrew's toast. "My family doesn't quite understand what I do." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "Family dynamics can be complicated." I noticed during Andrew's speech that there seems to be some tension. Something in his tone made me feel he genuinely wanted to understand rather than judge. Perhaps it was the 2 glasses of wine I'd had, or the emotional exhaustion of the day, but I found myself opening up. Andrew's always been the golden child. My achievements have never quite measured up in my parents' eyes. "I understand more than you might think," Michael said quietly. "My older sister was the family prodigy. Concert pianist, full scholarship to Juilliard. Nothing I did could compete with that brilliant spotlight. How did you deal with it? I asked. Not well, at first, he admitted. Then I found medicine, something that was entirely my own. I stopped trying to win my parents' approval and focused on work that fulfilled me. He paused. Eventually, my success forced them to acknowledge me on my own terms. As we continued talking, I learned more about Michael's background and his current research. The conversation flowed easily, centered on neurology and medical advances, topics no one in my family had ever shown interest in discussing with me. I have to ask, I said eventually. How did you end up as Andrew's best man? You seem to come from different worlds. Michael took a sip of his drink before answering. I specifically requested to meet him after I saw your name listed as a family connection in his bio at the fundraiser. I was intrigued by the connection. When we met, he was eager to network with someone from the medical establishment. A hint of something unreadable crossed his face. I may have let him believe my connections could benefit his career. And the best man role? That developed naturally through business meetings. Though I had my own reasons for accepting. He glanced toward Andrew, who was watching us from across the room with a frown. I believe in setting the record straight when I see talent being undervalued. His words sent a small shiver of anticipation through me. Before I could ask what he meant, Andrew appeared beside us. Mike, they're looking for you for the next round of photos, he said brusquely, barely acknowledging me. Michael nodded but didn't move immediately. I've been having a fascinating conversation with your sister about her research. Did you know her work is being considered for implementation in trauma centers nationwide? Andrew's smile tightened. Jessica always had her unusual interests. If you'll excuse us, Mike, my mother is waiting. As Michael reluctantly departed, I noticed the calculating look in Andrew's eyes as he watched him walk away, followed by a flash of something like worry when he turned back to me. The string quartet began playing a waltz as guests returned to their tables for dessert. I was contemplating making my exit when Andrew suddenly appeared at my side again, this time without Michael. We need to talk, he said tersely, guiding me with a firm hand on my elbow toward a quiet corner of the venue. His grip was tight enough to suggest this wasn't optional. What's going on, Andrew? I asked once we were out of earshot of other guests. His typically confident expression had been replaced by something tenser, almost anxious. What exactly did Michael tell you? We mostly discussed neurology research, I said, confused by his intensity. Why? Andrew ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, a nervous gesture I hadn't seen since we were children. Listen, Jess, there's something you should know about Mike. He's not just some random doctor I met. I know who Dr. Hayes is, I replied. He's one of the most respected neurosurgeons in the country. That's not what I mean. Andrew lowered his voice. When I met him at that fundraiser, I recognized his name from your research papers that Mom sometimes mentions. I thought it would be useful to connect with him. A cold feeling began spreading through my chest. What do you mean, useful? Andrew glanced around to ensure no one was listening. During our first meeting, I might have shared some stories about you. You know, to break the ice, create a connection. What kind of stories? My voice had dropped to a whisper. Just funny childhood stuff. Like how you set the kitchen on fire trying to do a science experiment. The time you fell asleep in the library and missed your final. How you had that breakdown during your second year of med school. He waved his hand dismissively. Bonding material. Each example felt like a slap. The kitchen incident had been an accident when I was 12. The missed final had been because I was working 3 jobs to pay tuition. And the breakdown had been pneumonia from exhaustion. You used my struggles as bonding material? I said incredulously. Andrew's expression hardened. Look, I needed to establish a relationship with him. His connections to hospital boards could mean millions in investments for my firm. And that justified humiliating me to a stranger? My voice was rising despite my efforts to control it. It wasn't like that, Andrew insisted, though his eyes slid away from mine. Anyway, it worked. We became friends. But then something unexpected happened. When he found out you were my sister, he became interested. Interested how? Andrew's jaw tightened. He started asking questions about your research, your career. Then I discovered he's the head of that fancy research program you applied to. The realization hit me like ice water. You knew? You knew he was reviewing my application? I found out later, Andrew admitted. And I might have implied to him that your research wasn't entirely your own work. That you had significant help from senior colleagues. The room seemed to tilt around me. You deliberately tried to sabotage my application? Why would you do that? Andrew's facade finally cracked, revealing a glimpse of the insecurity beneath. Do you know what it's like, Jess? My entire life, I've been the successful one. The one with the future. Then suddenly you're publishing papers, getting recognition in medical journals. Mom started carrying copies of your publication to show her friends. So this was about jealousy? I asked, disbelief coloring my voice. You tried to ruin a career opportunity for me because you couldn't stand sharing the spotlight? You don't understand, Andrew hissed. I built my entire identity around being the achiever in this family. I couldn't let you take that from me. I never tried to take anything from you, I said, feeling a strange calm replace the initial shock. I just wanted to succeed on my own terms. To contribute something meaningful to the world. Well, your contribution was threatening my image in the family, Andrew snapped. I needed to protect what I built. By lying about me to Dr. Hayes? By humiliating me in your wedding toast? Andrew straightened his tie, composure returning. The toast was just a joke. Everyone laughed. They laughed because they didn't know better, I said quietly. Because they don't know me. What matters is what they think of me, Andrew replied coldly. And I'd appreciate if you'd stop cozying up to Michael. Whatever he told you about my comments, I'm sure he's exaggerating. I think we're done here, I said, stepping back from my brother. For the first time, I saw him clearly, not as the golden child I'd spent a lifetime trying to measure up to, but as someone so deeply insecure he'd sabotage his own sister. Don't make a scene, Jess, Andrew warned. It's my wedding day. I wouldn't dream of it, I replied. Enjoy your perfect day with your perfect image. I'm leaving. As I turned to walk away, Andrew called after me, don't be dramatic. No one will even notice you're gone. I didn't respond, merely continued walking toward the exit, dignity intact despite the storm of emotions inside me. As I passed through the ornate doorway of the reception hall, I heard someone call my name. Turning, I saw Samantha hurrying toward me, concern evident on her face. Jessica, wait. Are you leaving? I nodded, not trusting my voice. I saw you talking with Andrew. He looked upset. It's nothing, I said automatically. Just a small disagreement. Samantha's expression told me she didn't believe that for a second. I've seen how he treats you, she said quietly. It's been a source of tension between us since we started dating. This surprised me. Really? She nodded. The way he talks about you when you're not around. I've called him out on it many times. She twisted her new wedding ring nervously. I thought he was improving, but that toast today. She shook her head. I'm so sorry, Jessica. You deserve better. Thank you, I said, touched by her unexpected support. But you shouldn't be dealing with this on your wedding day. Neither should you, she replied firmly. And for what it's worth, Dr. Hayes has been talking about your research all weekend. He thinks you're brilliant. I blinked back unexpected tears. Thank you for telling me that. Samantha hesitated, then added, Andrew isn't always the person he pretends to be. I love him, but I see his flaws clearly. Don't let his insecurities diminish your light. With those surprisingly insightful words, she embraced me quickly before returning to her guests, leaving me to contemplate whether I should truly leave or stay to face whatever remained of this difficult day. I found myself in the quiet elegance of the venue's lobby, my overnight bag in hand, car keys digging into my palm as I clutched them tightly. The valet had just been called to retrieve my car when a voice behind me spoke. "Leaving without saying goodbye?" I turned to find Michael Hayes standing a few feet away, hands casually in his pockets, watching me with that same intense gaze I'd noticed earlier. "It seemed like the best option," I replied, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Because of what Andrew told you?" he asked directly. I stiffened. "You know about that conversation?" "I saw enough to guess the content," Michael said, stepping closer. "Let me guess," he admitted to attempting to sabotage your application to my program with some manufactured stories about your research? The accuracy of his assessment left me momentarily speechless. "How did you know?" "Because he tried," Michael said simply. "About 3 months ago, Andrew began casually mentioning concerns about the originality of your work. At first, I thought he was genuinely worried about potential ethical issues. Then I realized he was deliberately attempting to plant doubts." "And did it work?" I couldn't help asking, even though I dreaded the answer. Michael's expression softened. "Jessica, I've been reviewing neurological research for over 15 years. I can recognize authentic brilliance and original thinking. Nothing Andrew said could undermine what was evident in your work." Relief washed through me, followed quickly by renewed anger at Andrew. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I recognize the expression of someone about to walk away from a situation that needs confronting." Michael's gaze was steady. "I did the same thing once. My sister was the musical prodigy, perfect pitch, international performances by age 12. Nothing I did seemed to matter to my parents by comparison." "What happened?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I disappeared into my studies, avoided family gatherings, built a life completely separate from them. It was easier than facing the constant comparison." He smiled ruefully. "It took years before I realized that by walking away, I was letting their narrative define me. That by avoiding confrontation, I was tacitly accepting their assessment of my worth." His words resonated uncomfortably. Wasn't that exactly what I was doing now? Running away to avoid further pain rather than standing my ground? "It's not that simple," I said. "This isn't just about Andrew's toast or his attempts to undermine my career. It's about a lifetime of being treated as less than. About parents who never showed up for me the way they did for him." "I understand," Michael said. "And you have every right to walk away. But consider this, by leaving now, you allow their version of you to stand unchallenged. The family embarrassment becomes the narrative that everyone at this wedding walks away with." I hadn't considered that perspective. For years, I'd focused on proving my worth through academic and professional achievements, but I'd never directly confronted the family dynamics that continued to diminish me. "What would you suggest instead?" I asked. "Stay. Finish this evening on your terms. Show everyone, including yourself, that you won't be defined by Andrew's words or your parents' neglect." The valet appeared in the doorway. "Your car is ready, ma'am." I hesitated, key still in hand. Then slowly, I returned them to my purse. "I think I'll be staying a bit longer after all." Michael smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. "Good decision." As we walked back toward the reception, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. My parents were standing near the entrance, clearly looking for someone. When they spotted me, they approached quickly. "Jessica, there you are," my mother said, voice tight with disapproval. "Andrew said you were causing a scene and threatening to leave." Of course he had. Before I could respond, my father added, "This is your brother's special day. Whatever issues you have could surely wait for another time." For once, I didn't automatically accept their criticism or apologize. Michael's presence beside me somehow bolstered my confidence. "Actually," I said calmly, "I was leaving because Andrew just admitted to deliberately trying to sabotage my career opportunity because he was jealous of my research recognition." My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. "I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding," my father said dismissively. "There's no misunderstanding," I continued, my voice steady. "Andrew has spent years making me feel less than, with your implicit support. Today he called me the family embarrassment in front of 200 people, and you sat there smiling." "It was just a joke, Jessica," my mother said weakly. "You've always been so sensitive." "It wasn't a joke," I said firmly. "And this pattern has gone on my entire life. You've consistently prioritized Andrew's achievements and needs over mine. You missed my medical school award ceremony to attend his corporate dinner. You sent flowers instead of visiting when I was hospitalized." My parents looked genuinely startled, as if hearing these events described from my perspective for the first time. "We never meant to make you feel less important," my mother said, her certainty wavering slightly. "But you did," I replied simply. "And I've spent years making excuses for it, telling myself it didn't matter. But it does matter. I matter." A long silence followed my words. Then, surprisingly, my mother's expression shifted from defensive to reflective. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "we haven't been as fair as we should have been. Your father and I. We always worried more about you because things didn't come as easily. Andrew seemed to succeed effortlessly, while you struggled. So you focused on him because I needed you more?" I asked incredulously. "No, that's not." My mother hesitated. "I don't know. I never thought about it that way before." It wasn't a full acknowledgement or apology, but it was the first time my mother had shown any recognition that their behavior might have been unfair. A small crack in a lifetime of dismissal. Michael, who had remained respectfully silent during this exchange, cleared his throat gently. "Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, I hope you don't mind my intrusion, but as someone who works with Jessica professionally, I feel compelled to say that your daughter is one of the most brilliant researchers I've encountered. Her work is changing how we approach neurological trauma treatment." My parents looked at him with sudden interest, his status as both Andrew's best man and a medical authority giving weight to his words in a way mine never had. "Is that so?" my father asked, reassessing me with new eyes. "Absolutely," Michael confirmed. "In fact, I came to this wedding specifically hoping to speak with her about a position at our institute." This wasn't entirely true, but the effect on my parents was immediate. Their posture straightened, expressions shifting from dismissive to attentive. "Well," my mother said, with forced brightness, "we've always been very proud of Jessica's dedication." It was a small, awkward attempt, but something in me recognized it as the beginning of a potential shift. Not dramatic or complete, but a hairline fracture in the family dynamic that had defined my life. "The dessert course is starting," my father said, clearly eager to end the uncomfortable conversation. "Shall we head back in?" As they walked ahead, Michael leaned close to murmur, "That was impressively handled." "It doesn't feel resolved," I admitted. "Family healing rarely happens in a single conversation," he replied. "But you've taken the first step by speaking your truth. That counts for something." As we re-entered the reception hall, I felt a strange new confidence. For the first time, I had confronted the family narrative directly instead of trying to disprove it through achievement alone. Whatever happened next, I had reclaimed my voice. The reception was in full swing when we returned, with guests finishing their desserts as the DJ announced it was time for the best man speech. Michael excused himself with a meaningful glance that left me curious about what he planned to say. I found my way back to my assigned table, where my elderly tablemates regarded me with newfound interest after having witnessed my earlier spotlight moment during Andrew's toast. The woman beside me patted my hand sympathetically as Michael took the microphone at the front of the room. "Good evening, everyone," Michael began, his voice carrying easily through the venue. "For those who don't know me, I'm Michael Hayes, Andrew's best man and, some might say, an unexpected friend from outside his usual financial circles." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd as Michael continued with traditional opening remarks, praising the beauty of the ceremony and Samantha's radiance as a bride. Andrew sat at the head table looking pleased and slightly smug, clearly expecting another tribute to his perfection. I met Andrew at a hospital fundraiser last year, Michael continued. As someone who spent my career in medicine rather than finance, I was initially surprised by how quickly we connected. But Andrew has a gift for making people feel valued and understood. Andrew nodded appreciatively, raising his glass in acknowledgement. What struck me most about Andrew, however, was something that only became clear over time, Michael said, his tone shifting subtly. While many successful people build themselves up by diminishing others, true character reveals itself in how we treat those closest to us, especially family. A slight furrow appeared between Andrew's brows as he registered the unexpected turn in Michael's speech. Success can be measured in many ways, Michael continued thoughtfully. Financial achievements and career advancements are certainly valid metrics. But perhaps the most meaningful measure is the positive impact we have on others' lives and on society as a whole. Michael's gaze swept the room before settling briefly on me. That's why I've been particularly impressed learning about the Taylor family's collective contributions. While Andrew has certainly distinguished himself in finance, I've had the privilege of witnessing the remarkable impact of the Taylor name in my own field of medicine as well. A murmur of interest rippled through the crowd as guests glanced around, trying to identify which Taylor might be in medicine. My parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some of you may not be aware, Michael continued, but Andrew's sister, Dr. Jessica Taylor, is revolutionizing how we treat traumatic brain injuries. Her research on neural pathway regeneration is currently being implemented in trauma centers across the country, with the potential to improve recovery outcomes for thousands of patients annually. All eyes turned toward me again, but this time with expressions of interest and respect rather than awkward pity. Andrew's face had frozen in a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. In fact, Michael said, raising his glass, I'm pleased to announce publicly for the first time that Dr. Taylor has been selected as the newest research fellow at the Neurological Innovation Center, where she'll be leading a team developing these groundbreaking treatment protocols. Gasps and murmurs spread through the room. I sat in stunned silence. I had applied for the position but hadn't yet received any official notification. Michael caught my eye and gave a small nod of confirmation that sent a wave of elation through me. So while we celebrate Andrew and Samantha's union today, Michael continued smoothly, I think it's worth acknowledging that success takes many forms, and the Taylor family has much to be proud of in all their children. The emphasis on all was subtle but unmistakable. Guests applauded enthusiastically while Andrew's expression cycled through shock, anger, and finally forced appreciation as cameras turned his way. To Andrew and Samantha, Michael concluded, raising his glass higher. May your marriage be built on mutual respect, genuine support, and the recognition that each person's journey and contributions are uniquely valuable. As applause filled the room, I noticed my parents exchanging glances, looking at me with expressions I'd rarely seen directed my way, something approaching pride, mixed with confusion and perhaps a touch of shame. Guests began approaching my table, asking questions about my research with genuine interest. A neurosurgeon from Samantha's family engaged me in an enthusiastic discussion about my methodology. A cousin who had suffered a concussion in a car accident thanked me for work that might help others in similar situations. From across the room, I could see Andrew attempting to redirect attention back to himself and Samantha, but the dynamic had shifted. For the first time in our family history, I wasn't an afterthought or the other Taylor child. I was Dr. Jessica Taylor, neurological researcher, worthy of recognition in my own right. Samantha caught my eye from the head table and gave me a genuine smile and subtle thumbs up. Whatever complications existed in her relationship with Andrew, she seemed genuinely pleased by this public recognition of my work. As the reception transitioned to dancing, Michael made his way back to my table, now surrounded by interested guests. I hope you don't mind the announcement, he said quietly when we had a moment alone. The committee made the decision yesterday, and the formal offer letter will be in your email Monday morning. I don't mind at all, I replied, still processing the enormity of what had just happened, both professionally and within my family dynamic. Though I suspect Andrew might have some feelings about it. Michael smiled. Perhaps. But sometimes the most valuable gift we can give someone is the opportunity to grow beyond their limitations. Andrew's perception of himself as the only successful tailor may have been comfortable, but it wasn't serving either of you well. Looking across the room at my brother, who was now dancing with Samantha while stealing glances our way, I wondered if this day might mark not just the beginning of his marriage, but also the beginning of a new chapter in our complicated relationship. The formal reception wound down around midnight, but a core group of guests migrated to the hotel bar for after-wedding drinks. I found myself sitting at a small table with Michael, discussing details of the research position I would be starting in a month. The lab space was recently renovated, Michael explained, his enthusiasm evident. You'll have state-of-the-art equipment and a team of 3 research assistants to start. It sounds perfect, I said, still somewhat dazed by how dramatically the day had turned. I have to ask though, why didn't you tell me about the position earlier? Michael smiled. The committee vote was genuinely yesterday. But I've been advocating for your selection since I first read your paper, long before meeting Andrew. Your approach to neural regeneration is exactly what our center needs. Our conversation was interrupted when Samantha appeared, having changed from her wedding gown into an elegant white cocktail dress. Mind if I join you? She asked. Please, I said, gesturing to an empty chair. Samantha settled in, looking tired but happy. Quite a day, she said, with significant understatement. Congratulations again, I offered. It was a beautiful ceremony. And an eventful reception, she added with a knowing look. I wanted to tell you, Jessica, I'm truly impressed by your resilience. And I'm thrilled about your research position. Thank you, I said, touched by her sincerity. That means a lot. I've been telling Andrew for months that he needs to see your accomplishments as additions to the family legacy, not competition, Samantha confided. Maybe now he finally will. Speaking of Andrew, I spotted him approaching our table with a determined expression. Samantha noticed too and squeezed my hand. I think I'll give you 2 a moment, she said, standing. Michael, would you mind getting me a sparkling water at the bar? Michael nodded, giving me a questioning look to confirm I was comfortable being left alone with Andrew. I nodded slightly, and they moved away just as Andrew reached the table. Can we talk? He asked stiffly. Privately. I gestured to the empty chairs. It seems pretty private now. Andrew sat, straightening his bow tie unnecessarily. For a moment, he seemed at a loss for words, an unusual state for my typically verbose brother. That was quite a speech your friend gave, he finally said, an edge to his voice. He's my colleague, I corrected. And yes, it was. You could have told me about the research position. I didn't know about it until Michael announced it, I said honestly. Unlike some people, I don't manipulate professional relationships for personal gain. Andrew winced slightly at the pointed reference. Look, Jess, about what I said earlier. About trying to sabotage your application. I was drunk and upset. You were completely sober, I corrected calmly. And you meant every word. Andrew's facade cracked slightly, revealing a glimpse of genuine emotion. Fine. Yes. I was jealous, okay? Do you know what it's like to hear Dad on the phone bragging about his daughter, the brilliant doctor, after a lifetime of being the only child he ever talked about? I stared at him in disbelief. Are you serious? One instance of Dad mentioning me with pride, and you felt threatened enough to try to damage my career? Andrew looked away. When you put it like that, it sounds terrible. Because it is terrible, Andrew. That's what I've been trying to tell you. A long silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of decades of imbalanced family dynamics. I don't know how to be anything but the successful one, Andrew finally admitted, voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. It's been my identity since we were kids. You don't have to stop being successful for me to be successful too, I said more gently. There's room for both of us to achieve things. Andrew nodded slowly. I'm sorry, Jess. For the toast, for what I tried to do with Michael, for a lot of things, probably. It wasn't the most eloquent apology, but from Andrew, it was unprecedented. I sensed he was genuinely struggling with reconciling his self-image with his actions. I can't pretend everything is suddenly fixed, I told him honestly. But I appreciate the apology. It's a start. Andrew nodded again, looking relieved but still uncomfortable. So, this research position. It's a big deal? It's the opportunity of a lifetime, I confirmed. A chance to implement my research protocols on a national scale. That's really impressive, Jess. The admission seemed to cost him something, but he got it out. Our conversation was interrupted by the approach of our parents, who had clearly been watching our interaction from across the room. There are our children, my mother said with forced cheerfulness. The brother-sister chat we've been waiting for. My father cleared his throat awkwardly. Jessica, your mother, and I have been talking. This research position Dr. Hayes mentioned, we'd like to hear more about it. It was the first time in my adult life that either parent had expressed genuine interest in my work. I found myself describing the position and my research in terms they could understand, watching with surprise as they listened attentively. Neural regeneration, my father repeated, testing the phrase. And this could help people recover from brain injuries? That's the goal, I confirmed. If successful, it could significantly improve outcomes for stroke and trauma patients. Well, my mother said, with what appeared to be genuine pride, that's certainly something to celebrate. She hesitated, then added, perhaps we haven't been as attentive to your work as we should have been. It wasn't quite an apology, but like Andrew's, it represented a crack in the long-established family dynamic. I'd be happy to share more about it, I offered. Maybe next time you're in the city, we could have dinner? We'd like that, my father said, with surprising warmth. As they drifted away to say goodbyes to other guests, I felt a strange mixture of emotions, hope tempered by the realistic understanding that decades of family patterns wouldn't change overnight. 6 months later, I stood at a podium in the main auditorium of Boston Memorial Hospital, presenting the preliminary results of our neural regeneration trials to a packed audience of medical professionals. The data was promising. Patients receiving our experimental treatment showed 37% better recovery outcomes than the control group. In the front row sat Michael, now both my mentor and friend, nodding encouragingly as I navigated complex questions from the audience. And to my surprise, 3 rows back sat my parents and Andrew, who had flown in specifically for this presentation. During the reception afterward, I watched as my father proudly introduced himself to my colleagues as Dr. Taylor's father, while my mother engaged animatedly with a stroke survivor who had benefited from our early trials. Andrew approached, looking somewhat out of place among the medical professionals but making an effort. That was impressive, Jess. I didn't understand half of it, but everyone seems very excited. Thanks for coming, I said sincerely. It means a lot. Samantha insisted, he admitted with a small smile. But I'm glad we came. Dad hasn't stopped talking about his brilliant daughter since we landed. Our relationship remained a work in progress. Competitive instincts didn't disappear overnight. But Andrew had begun making genuine efforts to celebrate my successes rather than undermine them. As the evening wound down, Michael joined me by the window overlooking the Boston skyline. Quite a different scene from that wedding, isn't it? He observed. I smiled, remembering how far we'd come from that painful day. Sometimes I still can't believe how things turned out. I can, Michael said confidently. I knew from the first time I read your research that you were exceptional. I just needed to make sure you had the platform you deserved. About that, I said, turning to face him directly. You never did explain how you ended up as Andrew's best man. The networking explanation never quite added up. Michael smiled. I was wondering when you'd call me on that. He glanced across the room to where Andrew was chatting with a neurologist. The truth? After reading your groundbreaking paper, I wanted to recruit you to our program. When I saw the Taylor connection in Andrew's bio at that fundraiser, I deliberately sought him out, hoping to learn more about you. You orchestrated the whole thing? I asked, astonished. Not the wedding drama, he clarified. But positioning myself to meet you? Absolutely. Great talent deserves recognition, Jessica. Sometimes it just needs a little help cutting through the noise. As I processed this revelation, I realized that the path from family embarrassment to respected researcher hadn't been a straight line. It had required confronting painful family dynamics, standing my ground, and accepting support from unexpected allies. "So what's next for Dr. Jessica Taylor?" Michael asked. "The Phase 2 trials are looking promising, and there's talk of expanding the program nationally." I smiled, feeling a confidence that came not from external validation but from finally recognizing my own worth. "I'm just getting started." What's your experience with family dynamics like the ones in this story? Have you ever been underestimated by those who should have been your biggest supporters? Or have you witnessed someone else's talents being overlooked? Comment below with your thoughts and experiences. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if Jessica's journey of standing up for herself resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the most important validation is the one you give yourself. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it inspires you to recognize your own worth, regardless of others' perceptions.